Next up in the winner's bracket, we've got a Chief Jaguar versus Wounded Elk. This is going to be a Cybern versus UEF matchup. A Chief Jaguar, strangely enough, actually picking Cybern on the north side than on the south, UEF. The faction of choice for Wounded Elk, who is in the brilliant purple color. Actually, that is pink. I don't know why my brain went there, but there it has gone. And a Chief Jaguar in his traditional royal navy blue. Land first is a pretty traditional thing and definitely to be commended. He's also going for 6 T1 power generators, after which I am sure we shall see a T1 air factory. Wounded Elk Noob has done a rather extensive early build, shall we say. He has gone for first land. He is going for intertwined build of mass extractors and power generators, as one would if you actually knew how to play this game. Although the building of 4 internal mass extractors with the ACE walking around seems to be somewhat of an odd choice, but do it he shall, and I shall not argue with him, as he is a much better player than I. Looks like we've got a total of 6 T1 power generators for the air factory in that case as well. Second air. Oh no! 6 power generators, second land, 2 more power generators, and then air, followed by 4 additional P-gens. That is a weird one. Okay, well, checking back out to the center of the map, it should be noted that there are anti-air turrets and point events in the middle, so of course, you want to be directing your things around to the edges. Mr. Rowie pointing out the Jaguar is an 1800 ladder and Wounded is 1700 ladder. So these are very equally matched players indeed. Okay, there is a Hunter moving to the left and to the right, I think. Yeah, that is a Hunter, not a Mantis. So a Chief Jaguar is on his way to domination by overwhelming early combat force, although I don't think that anyone would call a single lab overwhelming combat potential. Jaguar finishing off 8 power generators. He did add a couple of additional ones before he goes for that second air factory. Then he is also going for a third air factory. This is going to be a Mantis Scout pair assisted to the engineer to guard it, as it builds a land factory on the outside edge in order to get all of this lovely reclaim gotten. Speaking of lovely reclaim, look at the map spread on that son of a diddly. We've got 2 scouts to the outside edges that will be picked off by the labs in their respective corners, alerting Wounded Elk to the fact that there are units headed his way, but there was nothing there in the way of combat potential to stop them. So once all that reclaim starts flowing in, you need to do 2 things. You need to get your production up so that you can get enough tanks to secure the map control so you can get even more of this lovely reclaim under your belts. And you also need to be boosting your permanent income with that temporary income. Via 3 Protectorate tends to scale quite quickly due to the sheer size of the map for one thing, the amount of mass extractors for another, and thirdly, the overwhelming piles of mass at your disposal. That Hunter is not going to fare very well versus a couple of tanks, although it might just slip through with 12 HP remaining due to the fact that that tank was not able to clear the cliff. However, the tank rolling off the factory will definitely be able to score the elimination. Hunter also running back towards the center will be able to kill off this engineer, barring a heroic reclaim effort. But I don't think it's going to get much more than that. Oh no! It actually ran away from the engineer in order to take tank fire to the face, escaping on 4 HP to loop past another engineer that the bomber is going to steal the kill away from. No! Engineer actually got away from it, but the Hunter is going to get picked up by the tank right there, leaving the engineer on 22 HP. Bomber will come in and finish off the job though, and that is the end of that. I've got a T1 bomber out for Wounded Elk that will head to the north, and I'm not sure why that bomber is focusing the ACU. That seems like the least useful target that it could possibly go for, and now it is flying off to another, but it is going to get nailed by that interceptor and eliminated. Okay, so that is pretty much the end of the early game rabble-rousing. Now we got a couple of tanks moving in on the Chief Jaguar settlements, but of course, we will have combat units to respond to those shortly. Although both of those tanks did survive quite handily, and now that engineer is in a distinct danger of being eradicated. Point defense going up on the front line for a Chief Jaguar. That is a good thing to do. Also, reclaiming with the engineer to speed the death of that tank. An awesome thing as well, and one of the indicators of the higher APM that marks the better players in this game. Also getting a radar down so we can see exactly where those little blips are coming in from. Chief Jaguar, let's go check on this. 420 power income, although he is still mass stalling by a huge amount. And 4,000 reclaim deep in his bank account. We've got 3,600 reclaim with 320 power income on the other side, but that power appears to be sufficient due to the fact that there is only one fully ringed air factory as opposed to a Chief Jaguar's two partially ringed air factories. I think a certain amount of power stall is admissible on Via 3 though. Any map where there is brutal amounts of reclaim tends to behave in that way, because you can't really anticipate how much mass you're going to have incoming at any given time. Your best bet is basically just to overbuild power by a little and hope for the best. Although you will see people like Zoc playing Via 3 Protectorate and doing quite well on their eco balance, but of course they are superhuman faff machines, so we shouldn't give them too much credit in their exploits of the economic system. And of course, I am being sarcastic once again there because they are exceptionally fine players, but I don't think that the vast majority of us can hope to rise to the level of eco balance that they inhabit. All right, Jaguar's got quite a substantial amount of Mantis on the left-hand edge, mostly due to the fact that he has 7 freaking factories pouring over that side. The ACU is on the right, therefore no units are actually needed, at least that appears to be his philosophy, and the ACU is dropping another land factory on that edge. Now there's enough tanks on this side to maybe prove that to be a not so wise judgment on his part, but as things move forward, things are looking okay. We do have more factories in total for Wounded Elk, so production may become an issue later on, but it is not so much of a detriment that it is game ending. Let's actually go click over here. We can see 2 air factories and a total of 14 land versus a Chief Jaguar with his 12 land and 2 air factories all the same. And he has also managed to fix his power problem. So again, a 2 land factory deficit is not so large a thing to overcome. What I'm curious about is who is going to go to T3 first. 2 possibilities. Number 1, Wounded Elk sticks with pillar spam for an inordinately long period of time, and or attempts the mongoose spam that we saw in one of the previous games of this tournament. That appears to be a viable strategy. On the other hand, he could rush to T3 and go Titans, because you can pretty much bet on the fact that Cybern is going to spam the ever-living hell out of T1 until it's able to go to the T3 stage, at which point it will build Loyalists. Titans are extremely capable versus T1, so they'll be very, very useful indeed, both with their speed in order to get to all of the edges of this very large map and mop up the T1, and in their high fire rate that doesn't waste any damage, though there is only a little damage to be had on a Titan. It doesn't lose out that damage to overkill. On the other hand, the Cybern player could choose to exploit Equilibrium's longer T2 stage and go Rhinos, which would completely counter the Titans. Or the T3 rush could be early enough that the Titan advantage is lost, at which point it will be Percival's versus Titans, and Cybern will be able to outmaneuver UEF for an extensive period of time, allowing for greater map control. We have yet to see which one of those this will be, but we are reaching the stagnation point where both of these players will be able to attempt large-scale economic upgrades and then be able to move on with their endgame plans. Now, in the center of this map, we are saying Wounded Elk eliminate all of the defenses while leaving the defenses up on his opponent's side. He's already got the engineers moving in So that's going to give him an opportunity to gain a massive upper hand in Reclaim, especially due to the Fabricator in the center here that is worth 3,200 mass by itself, notwithstanding all of the additional civilian buildings around it. And of course, those T1 point events are still up in place for a Chief Jaguar's side. On the north, we've got Mantis engaging with a group of Strikers. I'm not sure that that will be able to come out victorious, but the clumping of a Chief Jaguar's units is definitely giving him a nice little advantage. Although when you stop moving, the Lobos are then able to drop their fiery shells upon your heads, and that could end badly for everyone. As we see right there, Mantis are on fire, and that was a massive amount of damage to the entire group. Jaguar is going to withdraw, and withdraw on the right as well. He already has a point defense up and a radar, although I'm not sure exactly why. The radar is in front of the point defense. That seems like extraordinarily poor placement of those items. All right, Mass Fabricator is getting reclaimed. Wounded Elk should probably be going for, yes, a heavily assisted Mass Extractor upgrade indeed. And a couple of T2 power generators are on the way, along with TAC missile defense, because of course on any map of significant size, there's always the possibility that someone will decide to put a TAC launcher in some random location and use it to, shall we say, eliminate some vital parts of your base. So, Chief Jaguar, how you doing over here? 20,000 mass reclaimed on 1,400 power income. Lovely balance, juggling the reclaim with his power needs while still scaling ever upwards. And also, he has got a T3 factory in place with the first brick rolling off the line. Surprisingly not going for loyalists. That is a huge surprise to me. I don't know what on earth he's doing with that one. 20,000 reclaim on the other side as well. Thanks to the center, Wounded Elk is only ever so slightly behind Jaguar in the mass game. 55 steady income, 263, again within about 10%. And then on power income, he is slightly ahead at 1.5k. We've also got a lovely little drop on the northern side. Transport is going to perish, but those 6 tanks have been dropped. There are no combat units to respond with, and those will, if they choose, be able to kill those mass extractors should they ever receive an order. Interceptors very nearly met their end right there, but Jaguar was able to respond in time to move them out of harm's way. T1 bombers kamikaze running the T1 units on the other side of the map. Of course, with those bombers, you're doing about 300 damage per pass. Doesn't sound like a lot, but the area of effect is rather massive. So if you're able to hit 6 units at a time, which in a clumped unit formation like that, it's a distinct possibility. If you're able to hit 6 units at once, that is somewhere in the vicinity of 1,800 damage per pass, which is more than sufficient to justify the cost of that T1 bomber dying. So you just suicide a few of those in, moving your troops to clean up, and that, as they say, is that. However, it is not so simple when there's an ACU up on the front edge. I don't think Jaguar knows what upgrades it has, although he does have it scouted. So, no, he doesn't have consistent radar coverage to be able to see the blip. Oh my! That's why he was going for bricks. He's dropping them into the rear base, overcoming their slowness with an airdrop directly onto the primary targets. And there is no air in the area. There is no denying these units being placed in the rear of this base. He also knows that the ACU was on this edge, so there's no overcharges to fear in this area. So he's going to be able to just absolutely trash the economy of his opponents without any fear of retaliation. There are a couple of strikers moving in. They do have 1,500 HP, not 1,900, as was claimed by Exotic Noob, so I don't know what he was on about with that. Strikers having 1,900 HP, unless this is an older version of Equilibrium or some such thing that is on the featured mod on the server. But that brick is going to take a little bit of heavy damage, not before 3 mass extractors are knocked out, and a 4th is about to go down. A couple of T1 point events coming into play in the center. That is a beautiful thing indeed. Pillars, not strikers, sorry, pillars. Good lord, I am misspeaking all over the place. And T2 power going down as well. Oh my, that is not a good way to have your game go, let me tell you. Those bricks are also going to be able to knock out the T2 engineer that was responsible for building the power. And in a last-ditch effort to pull this game back, we've got units moving in against the Chief Jaguar's commander, or at least where he thought a Chief Jaguar's commander was. But there are now loyalists pouring out of the factories, the fast response units of the Cybern faction, more than able to defeat a handful of T1 units of puny stature. And that is going to be a strong win for Jaguar in the mid-game. Now there is a chance that Wounded Elk could come back. He's got the T2 power generator Rex. He still has the T2 land HQ, but oh no, it is in the middle of an upgrade to T3. And it is 77%. Not in a good position to pause that son of a diddly. What I was going to say is if you have a T2 engineer, you can start rebuilding your T2 power generators. You finish that one, you build those two off of the wreckage for a 50% increase, or decrease rather, in the build speed, as well as recouping 50% of the cost. And life can turn out pretty dang well for you. He does still have enough units to hold the left side, I think. It's going to be a little close, but he does have it. And then, is there... Ah, he's starting a new T2 power generator up on this edge. I think that he may not have realized that he had a half-built T2 P-Gen up there. I think if I were in his position, I would have paused air, paused all of this stuff, taken all my build power, and just finished that P-Gen. It's at like 65%. And that would have solved, or at least helped solve, his power problems. But he is recuperating. He's back at 1.3k, mostly on the back of T1 power generation. And he's also building mongoose out of T2 support factories on the left-hand edge. On the right, we've got a paltry few T1 units and a single mongoose facing off against a group of loyalists. Not going to end well for him, I don't think. Also, we've got multiple bricks dropping in once again directly on where the power was. That is going to give him good positioning for wiping out the power once again, although in the meantime there will be a Titan hitting the field. Not exactly the best thing to counter a brick with, but it is something after all. There is a triad there as well, and another mongoose. But I think that with this drop, this will be the clinching of the defeat of Wounded Elk. There's the drop, a brick and a loyalist killing the T3 engineer, easily dispatching the Titan. Then you go after the T2 point defense. Oh good lord, the Titan actually has way more HP than it did before. Gonna finish off that T2 power generator as well, killing off everything in sight that could possibly be of any use. Oh dearly dear. That is a hard hit to take. But Wounded Elk has got T2 P-Gen online in his base, which has put him on par with the Chief Jaguar in production, and he's also built a massive string of T1 P-Gens in 2 different locations to help him recuperate from these strikes. However, a Chief Jaguar is still moving steadily towards the base, having taken advantage of the mayhem happening in the core to close in on the right-hand edge. That's going to be the elimination of a T2 mass extractor, a critical number of units, and now we have loyalists moving in on the left as well, eliminating a couple of mongoose and then some of the build power in this base. It is a sad thing to see indeed, but I think we're watching the inevitable collapse of a Wounded Elk. Those drops raped me. Yeah, that was I think an actual accurate description of what happened there. Wounded Elk bowing out, control K-ing, giving a Chief Jaguar the victory. Yeah, that was single-handedly the winner of the game right there. That single T2 transport with 2 bricks. Tied it all up with a pretty little bow for a Chief Jaguar to carry off that win. My goodness, that was devastating. Alright, Wounded Elk, well played, well attempted. You did a pretty dang fine job of securing the map control early on, and you were running neck and neck with Jaguar, but that one little oversight, not having a radar on the outside edge or air placed or something to deny something coming into the back of your base, cost you the game. And Jaguar, of course, well played indeed, taking that win, staying with the winner's bracket, advancing to the next round. Wounded Elk dropping to the loser's bracket. That is going to wrap everything up for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, feel free to drop a like and share it with someone. If you want to support the channel, catch the streams, or join the Discord, check out the links in the description. Thank you all for being at least partially insane, and I will see you in the next one.